Hey guys. Okay, today you're gonna learn a lot about me and my interests. I've been wanting to learn to animate for a while. I've dabbled in it a little bit, but never anything good. It's all elementary stuff and kind of silly, and it doesn't help that I was never all that serious about it in the first place. But now I feel that I really want to. I wrote this script kind of late at night, so this might be kind of a whim, but here we go. So, if you follow my channel, you might know that I like a few different things, such as the Stanley Parable and Italia. I also enjoy webtoons and obviously art. I'm very inspired by artists such as Pills, Saddest, Lavender Town, Numi, Casey Golden, Bit Happy, Love to Draw Manga, and others. Sorry if I totally butchered some of those names. And seeing these artists create amazing and quality animations has been at the back of my mind for years. I feel that my art style is fine quality-wise, but I think I'm gonna start with a plan. Give myself a 6-month training course, if you will. And if you want to follow along with me and do this course as well, I'd love to see your progress, and you're welcome to provide feedback. Of course, if there are any people watching this who are good at animating, or even just animate in general, please feel free to leave tips and suggestions in the comments. Alright, on to planning how this is gonna go. So first I want to establish a consistent art style. You can see that I've been drawing my character Alex here and just what is my normal style, my default. This video will be about creating that simpler style and developing something that will be much easier to animate than a fully rendered one. I'm mostly drawing inspiration from Pills and Casey Golden for style reference. I noticed that a lot of artists have a separate style from the illustrating one, as certain stylistic choices are much harder to animate than others. And so you'll see that I am trying to just draw something more general with my art style, just to see the difference between the normal art style and the one that I will be animating in. So this is my character Alex. He is a very, very old character, and I just picked him randomly for this. Something that I do a lot in my style is I don't connect my lines, and I use a lot of like line variation, and usually my line art is actually kind of a dark bluish gray color and not solid black. What I usually do to color things in is I take a lasso tool and I messily trace it and then fill it in with usually the skin color of the character, and I go back in and clean it up so it actually fits inside all of the lines. This is the best way that I've found to color, because usually it is pretty difficult to, for me at least, to have clean line art. And usually I just do it pretty messy and sketchily, and obviously I can't use the bucket tool because it'll just fill in everything, so this is what I've taken to doing. For my coloring, there's not much different. I tend to keep things on the desaturated side of things, and unfortunately that leads to a lot of my art looking kind of dull. And so what I've taken to doing is just upping the contrast in my program. Of course that doesn't help all that much, and I know that I really should start learning how to legitimately color, but for now that's just my general what I do. And I'm actually showing a speed paint that I captured with a screen recorder on my iPad instead of the default Clip Studio capture, and so you can see a little more in depth what I'm actually doing. You can see how it's all set up and stuff. My layers, and I don't name them. I know that I really should name my layers, but that's just never a habit that I quite picked up on. For this style, usually I just do a hard shell shading, but I wanted to really show a difference between this style and the style that I'll be using to animate, and so I did a soft painterly kind of style. And if you're wondering what brushes I'm using, I actually use a brush set from Lavender Town that I downloaded because I just think that they're amazing and I love the way that they blend. But I'm also using random brushes that I found on the Clip Studio asset store. You can kind of see me flitting back in between. I don't speak, I assume the names are in Japanese, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't speak that language, and so I couldn't tell you what the name says. It could say anything for all I know, but they are very useful. I use the bottom one for my line art and I use the top one for my shading because they're both very similar, but one has a harder edge, and that's the one that I use for sketching in line art, but it still is soft and tapered. See, I just bumped up the contrast and I feel like that made it so much better. What I also have started to do is I copy my line art and then I Gaussian blur it and then apply like a reddish hue over it, and so I just feel like it makes the art look a little more finished. And then I'll copy the colors and I'll paint it red, and then I will copy again and then paint it blue and kind of offset them a little bit, and I found that that actually looks pretty nice, and I apply like a soft Gaussian blur to them, turn down the opacity just a little bit, and I found that that actually helps it feel a little more complete. It's almost like adding a chromatic aberration to your art, but it's just kind of behind the character. And now we're on to my animating style. So for the animating style, it's I wanted it to be a little simpler, obviously, and I thought, you know, I'm probably not going to do much shading, maybe a little bit of shell shading, and I didn't want to do too much detail in the eyes, and so I just kind of made them chunky, a little blocky, and I just did the pupil, and I didn't do any iris, no bottom lid, a very simple mouth, and I had a hard time trying to make it make sense and still look like my style, because obviously I don't want to do something that's completely different. I didn't want to go super off the rails and try to create a new style entirely, because that's definitely something for a different video, but I wanted it to still feel like my style, yet I wanted it to be something that I could animate in, because if you look at the style on the left, it's definitely going to be pretty difficult to animate in, especially the rendering of it. And I just thought that doing something pretty quick and pretty simple would be way easier to try to do stuff in. And so, like I said, I still use kind of a lighter bluish gray for the line art, because I feel like it just looks a lot softer than a harsh black. I wanted to do the line art a little thicker. Usually my line art is pretty thin. When I'm doing it, it doesn't feel thin, but when I look back, it actually is pretty small. And I know that there's a way in Clip Studio to make it thicker, but sometimes it just kind of embrace the change. So the hair especially is just these blocky kind of shapes, and I didn't do too many individual strands. I just wanted them to be something that if I were to ever animate hair, that it would be relatively easy. Of course, I do think that someday I'm gonna want to try animating in my style, like my normal default style, but I do think that it might be easier just to practice and get the hang of movement, animation. And I think that it might be the hardest part for me, aside from the anatomy and actual animation, might just be learning the program, because I've animated in Procreate before, just a little bit, but obviously if you aren't familiar with it, Procreate's animation style is pretty rudimentary. It just has a little timeline with some keyframes, and you can draw on the keyframes, and there's a little animation assist, but it's super basic. It's kind of like Flip-a-Clip. It's nice to use, but it's definitely not going to let you do as much as Clip Studio will, and there is a cap on how many layers you can have, and then you have to juggle all of the layers with no folders. There's separate animation folders in Clip Studio, which I'll get to that in a moment when I actually start practicing the animation, and I'll try to kind of explain it to you a little bit, because I had to look up a lot of tutorials for this one, because previously, prior to my decision to start learning how to animate, I had never tried animating on Clip Studio before. I mean, I've seen the option, and so I created a new animation thing, but it kind of scared me a little bit. So today I decided I was going to officially start, and I was going to try to teach myself, and I think that uploading my progress onto the internet might be kind of fun, and plus maybe other people can do this with me and learn along. So here I am. I'm just trying to do just normal shell shading. I didn't want to do anything too crazy. I didn't want to do any heavy blending. I actually applied blush to the cheeks and I tried blending it, but then I decided that it would probably be better just to either airbrush it or just do normal thick blocky blush, and so that's what I decided on. I wanted to make it a little lighter though, just so it didn't look as harsh on his skin. I usually apply blush to the bottom lip, the cheeks, and the top of the ears, and the hands, but in this instance there's no hands in this illustration. And I think we're about done. I wanted to also up the contrast in this one because I felt like it was looking a little flat. And there we go. That's just my finished illustration. I darkened the line art, and I know that I said that I really like the light gray, but for this one, I think the colors were getting a little too dark, so I darkened it up, and there's the direct comparison. So you can see that my art for the animation style is definitely a lot chunkier, and so now it's time to start animating. So here we go. Alright, so I have a new animation folder, which is just, I go up to File and I hit New, and then it gives me an option, and I just hit New Animation Folder. I just stuck with the default settings. And so on the bottom is the timeline, and that's where all of the animation cells are going to be. This is not a tutorial, this is just how I understand, and if I say anything wrong, please feel free to correct me. So the timeline at the bottom just holds all of the animation cells, and it's where you can kind of order things around. I figured that I might as well go with the classic ball bouncing practice, just so I can get a feel for the program. So I figured out how to add new cells, but then later on I decided that I needed to figure out how to duplicate cells, which is a little more complicated than I'd like, but then I got kind of used to it. Like I said, I'm not a pro animator. I don't know the first thing about animations. That's why I'm doing this series. So there's a little button that you'll see me clicking down right above the timeline that creates a new animation cell. And you can see on the right that it keeps adding layers to this animation folder. And if you look closely, you can see that it just keeps adding and adding and adding new layers to it. This is important to note because it means that you can not just only have layers to your animation, but you can also have normal layers, which will just be showing up all the time. So this is useful for things like backgrounds, I guess, foreground elements. And yeah, so there's the finished product, and don't worry, at the end, I'll just show you a quick GIF of my endeavor, I guess. Like I said, I'm not very good. This was really just for me to get a hang for the program itself, and it's pretty nice that Clip Studio just keeps it kind of similar, where it has the same layout, interface, and tools that the normal Clip Studio interface has, and so at least I didn't have to completely relearn a new thing. I do realize that programs like Toon Boom and stuff are quite different than Clip Studio Paint animating, but I found that I might as well use a program that I'm already familiar in. Alright, so I'm going to cut this and show you my animation of the little ball. Okay, so that sucks. It did not export in good enough quality, so it looks very choppy, but you can go back and see in the recording that I promise I actually had more cells than that, but anyways, so we're on to the next animation, I guess, and I wanted to try animating just a person, so I drew my little self, Sona, and I just wanted to animate her just blinking really quick. Nothing too crazy, nothing too intense. Really, I just wanted to start off simple since this is the first day of my journey, and hopefully by the end of this I'll actually be able to animate real things. I plan for this to be a pretty long series, so let's hope that my progress is evident at the end of this. So my self-Sona is pretty simple. She just has these swoopy bangs like I do, a similar haircut, kind of longer blonde hair, and obviously I'm not comfortable with showing my face, maybe someday, but for now you can kind of take a guess at what I look like from this, but it's pretty generic. It's nothing too specific. I usually draw myself wearing a sweater with a button-up collar underneath, and yeah, this part is mostly just me sketching out what will be the base for this, and at first I was going to have her wave, but then I decided that I wasn't quite advanced enough for that, and I was going to have to, next time, use probably stick figures. I don't think that I'm quite ready to animate characters with full-on features and clothes and like chibis like this. I think I'm gonna have to, next time, in next video, use more simplified characters. You know those little wooden stick guys that you can get at, like, Target? That's supposed to teach you anatomy? Probably something like that, with no real defining features. I'm just focusing on joints and points of the body. But that is for another day. For now, I am just sketching her out, and I wanted to also line and color this, so I tried keeping the sketch pretty clean. And I noticed that there's this box around her, and I wasn't quite sure what it was for, but then I realized that it's for if you need to draw kind of over the character. What's going to show up is what's within the box, but if you need extra room, then you can go on the outside of it. Now it was time to try to duplicate her. I was trying to figure out how to duplicate frames, and I learned that it is not the same as duplicating things in normal illustration. I watched a video, which is why you'll see me pause for quite a long time, because I tried to figure out how to duplicate the layer. So eventually I figured it out. You just either right click or tap and hold, depending on if you're on iPad or on a computer, and there's an option to duplicate, and then you click on the second frame on the timeline and you hit link. There's a button next to the new animation layer. Like I said, not a tutorial. There are plenty of videos that you can look up if you want to learn how to do this. I'm not the best person to explain this, but I was able to duplicate the layer and link it to the next, I guess, frame over on the timeline, and that blew my mind. Previous to this, I had not known how to do that, and so the video that I watched was really helpful. If you just search up Clip Studio how to duplicate frame, then there's a dozen and a half equally good videos that you can see. So I'm trying to make her blink, and I forgot to turn on onion skinning at first. Onion skinning is basically where you can see both the frame before and after your illustration, and so you can see kind of the green and blue colors that you might see on my sketch right now. It kind of looks like she's wearing eyeshadow, but that's basically the previous frame that I can kind of see, and it's in a lower opacity. And so I turned on onion skinning so I could make it seem like her eyes aren't going everywhere. And I'm just trying to slowly close her eyes. I didn't want to do too many frames for this because that might be a little ambitious to make her do a lot of crazy things. And so I just wanted a very simple blink. And just to, like I said, today is mostly about learning the program rather than the fundamentals of animation. The fundamentals of animation will probably be in the next video, and I'll probably need to take a little bit more time to create that video because I can imagine that it's going to take a little bit to understand. But there's plenty of videos on YouTube. Like I said, anyone can do this. Anyone can teach themselves how to animate with the wonders of YouTube and animation that we have today. And so that's just what I'm doing. I'm gonna teach myself alongside with the help of free gurus on the internet. And any resources that I find, I will try to put them in the descriptions of my videos for you, and so if you want to check them out. I just wanted to reverse the blink by taking the last frame, like the first couple frames, and just putting them in reverse order after her eyes are closed, and you just saw that it was a pretty smooth blink. I was actually very impressed with myself because if you look at any of my older animations, which I do not intend on showing you today, if you look at any of my older animations, then you can tell that this is definitely an improvement because I started off simple. So now I want to do liner, and this took me forever to figure out. I was like, I was trying to do it like I do in Procreate, where I just make a new layer above it and I lower the opacity of the sketch and just like merge them. That was not going to work. Clearly that was not how it was supposed to be. So I had to look up how to make a new animation folder because I was way out of my zone. I tried making a new layer under it and over it. I tried making a new normal folder and trying to go into the settings of that folder to change it to an animation folder. Turns out you actually have to go into the top corner, where it says animation, and you'll see me click new animation layer or something like that, and then you can make a new animation folder. I thought that I could just make a new layer, a new normal layer above the folder, and just do the line art. I didn't realize that that would mean that the line art would show up for every single frame. So you'll see me, I'm able to just take the line art and put it into a new animation folder. and there it's done, easy, simple, quick. So I was still able to use this line art, but oh boy, I did not realize that I was gonna have to do all that, and it's definitely different learning how to use this software. A part of me was grateful to go back to Procreate and draw on it a little bit, but I do realize the importance of knowing how to learn these programs, learn how they function, because you're able to do a lot more with Clip Studio than you are with Procreate. And one thing that was nice was that I was able to put a little bit of detail in my clothes. I add like a little necklace with a key, which is actually a necklace I have in real life. It's from the movie Coraline, which you might understand the reference to probably. And I was able to put some detail in the jeans. And like I said, do you see that line that goes across her jeans? Anything that's below that line, you can't see in the final animation. So I was able to just kind of cut it off there so I could use the fill bucket tool to just fill in her clothes and stuff without worrying about it going everywhere. And I won't see that part in the final animation. So I was able to just kind of cut it off without it looking weird. And so I was trying to put it above. You can see on the very bottom right corner, I was trying to put it above the sketch layer. And then I was gonna see, oh, maybe I can merge them if I tune the opacity of the sketch layer all the way down. But I didn't realize that that was not how this worked. So you can just kind of watch me struggle for a little while. And then I realized that if I take the first animation frame out of the animation folder, it is no longer connected to that specific frame. And I know that sounds kind of hard to comprehend if you don't know this animation software, but if you do, you realize what I'm talking about, that it takes it out of the animation because it's no longer in an animation folder and it'll just show up forever. So I undid all that, and I was still trying to just mess around with this because, like I said, it's not easy. This program is not super intuitive, so I looked up a lot of tutorials, a lot of FAQs, and I was able to finally figure this out. I'm just waiting for myself to figure it out because I'm sitting here. When you see me, there you go, new animation layer up on the top. When the screen just goes blank and I'm just sitting there and there's nothing happening in the screen recording, that's because I'm looking over at my phone trying to look up all these different tutorials. And so finally I figured out how to make an animation folder. I realized, oh, I have to put the line art in the folder for it to work. And then we were getting somewhere. So what I did with the line art is, like the sketch, I just copied and pasted it a bunch of times, and then I kind of subtly changed it with each new frame. I would duplicate it, and then I would attach it to the specific frame, and I would just repeat that process and change it slightly, and I would duplicate and attach, and it was a lot of technical stuff. Animation is a lot less about drawing and actually about the program and just clicking buttons and knowing what to click than I thought. And it's a lot of making a line, redoing it, making a line, redoing it. And I know that's also true in illustration, but I think in animation it's especially true just because of how hard some programs are to learn. It takes a lot of like messing around and clunking about, especially when you're first starting. Thankfully, I was doing something very simple, and so I didn't have to worry too much about animating the hair, and then the clothes, and then the necklace, and having those on separate layers to make it easier for me to edit them. And I'm sure that I will get into that later, once I start trying to animate more complicated things, but for now, the only thing I had to worry about was the eyes, and in hindsight, I probably should have animated the eyes in a different layer. I definitely could have gone about this different. Looking back, I could have had the entire body on a different layer that was just set. Since I wasn't animating it, I could have had it outside of the animation layer. And then on the animation layer, in the animation folder, then I would have the eyes and the eye blinking, and then maybe I could have done something with the mouth, and there's a lot more tricks that I could have done. Apparently, I decided it would be much easier to just erase and individually draw each eye on the same layer. Don't worry, I realized how incompetent I was being. I was just stubborn and was like, no, this is the best way, despite me not having any experience in animation. So This is honestly kind of a boring speed paint, but you can kind of see, if you're unfamiliar, you can kind of see what I'm doing, where I'm just duplicating, and a lot of it is kind of guessing. I had to guess, since I don't name my layers, which I should start doing. I don't typically name them, and so I had to drag them up, and I had to drag them down, try to figure out which layer is the correct layer, because looking at them on that tiny little preview down in the bottom right is pretty hard to decipher, especially when it's such a small change like the eyes. And then I deleted my sketch folder because I figured that I wouldn't need it anymore. That's later, I guess. And I wanted to export the sketch part so I can show you guys individually. I'll show you a GIF of the sketch animation, of the lined animation, and then of the colored animation. So what you see here is just me exporting them so I can show them to you later, but unfortunately, if the ball animation is anything to go off of, it will probably be messed up. And if anyone can tell me why it's being like that, if it's being all strange, and if it's not exporting correctly, then please let me know. This speed paint is a lot longer than I thought. Sorry, this video is going to be kind of a long one, but yeah, I just went through each different animation folder, and I colored them in separately. I decided not to color in the whites of the eyes because I figured that would be kind of tricky to do since I had the coloring on the outside of the animation folder, so it would just be there. I exported it, and there we go. That is the final product. Here you can look at the different animations. And the program didn't export them correctly, so I'm sorry that they kind of suck, but you can look back in the speed paint. Anyways, that's going to conclude episode 1, or part 1, of me teaching myself how to animate. And thank you so much for sticking around to the end. You're a real one. Alright, bye.